The Prime Minister took a break, but it was no holiday for the government. Its gambling reform is friendless. Planned migration changes are up in the air, and the property downturn is gathering pace. In better news, it's our anniversary, 25 years, and we'll celebrate with some very special guests. I'm David Speers. Welcome to Insiders. 25 years of Insiders. It's been quite a journey. Coming up a little later, founding host Barrie Cassidy is back. Paul Kelly, who was a fixture on the show for nearly a decade, and Karen Middleton, who's been bringing us insights from the couch through it all. First, let's try to make sense of a messy week. The Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke postponed a press club address, prompting all sorts of speculation about what went on in Cabinet and how he plans to bring migration numbers down. And a snap inquiry on gambling ads heard alarming evidence, putting more pressure on the government to crack down harder on the industry. With Parliament back tomorrow, Labor is now prepared to give ground in order to strike a deal. I understand that will include further restrictions on gambling companies offering inducements and tighter rules for ads broadcast on TV.
Gambling destroys lives.
A former NRL star has lifted the lid on the ugly side of
the gambling industry's tactics.
There were times where I would be flown interstate. VIP manager would offer you, go, hey mate, what drugs do you want? Do you want a couple of bags for this weekend? The inducements really destroyed my life.
This story isn't a one-off.
He was put up, he was given escorts.
This is quite extraordinary.
Appalling. I found that evidence quite shocking.
A snap two-day Senate inquiry.
Thrust into the spotlight.
The government's proposed changes.
So just to be clear, this legislation is weaker than the status quo. We're offering free accommodation, you said escorts, drugs. Could I ask, which companies were they?
They were TAB and Sportsbet and I think Star Casino.
Representatives from Australia's biggest sports betting agencies have been hauled before Parliament.
Zero evidence of the allegations made.
Any evidence of this illegal activity should be referred to the relevant authorities.
Has the industry always got things right? No.
Responses that drew little sympathy.
This is exactly why Australians are sick and tired of the BS that you try and tell us.
Your industry only gets to survive based on the social licence that you have, and you're on very thin ice.
If you are someone who is suffering from gambling harm and you do not wish to receive a text message, you can opt out forever using BetStop today.
The government just constantly talks about BetStop, and we all know that BetStop is basically scraping people off the ground at the bottom of the cliff.
We want to make sure that we get the balance right of supporting sporting codes, but we also want to make sure that we reduce gambling harms.
It's a direct appeal to Angus Taylor. Man up.
Well, we have a big show coming up. First, we're going to try and look at what's happening right now this week, and we're joined by Samantha Maiden, political editor for news.com.au, Karen Middleton, columnist for The Monthly, and Melissa Clarke, host of the ABC's AM program. Very good morning to all of you. Gambling ads, let's start there. As I mentioned, the government is now willing to give some ground after all the pressure that's been building on inducements and the broadcast rules. The details we don't know, but Sam, does it look like this is heading towards a deal in the coming days?
I think so. The government is really keen that it's full steam ahead. They want to get this through Parliament. They are prepared to make what they call sensible amendments. It's an open question of whether they've built this by design to give them room to move when they're not moving a great deal at all. There was a lot of things said about inducements at the ALP conference, and basically the Prime Minister and the Minister is clearly keen to move on that. I think there's some areas around TV ads that they're not prepared to move on, and then there's a whole question of how obsessed we should be with free-to-air when it's all going to move to streaming pretty soon.
Which is an interesting point. What is the coalition, which seems like the far more likely dance partner for Labor? Karen, is it clear what they actually want, what their bottom lines will be?
Well, I'm not sure that they're going to be satisfied with just something on inducements. I think they probably do want something on around the advertising, whether it's on the timing of ads, how late that, when that sort of cut-off period from, at the moment, 8:30 kicks in. So there might be something more that they will require around that. I think the inducements thing is very interesting because if you think about it, the inducements thing, it was in the original Peter Murphy report as something that needed urgently addressed, but it's also the thing that really targets the gambling industry itself as opposed to the whole kind of ecosystem with the broadcast and the sporting codes. And it was the only thing that Anthony Albanese allowed into the ALP national platform. There was a negotiation about other things, trying to get commitments on other things. That was the thing they agreed on.
If the companies can't offer these, inducements, bet now, we'll give you a bit more, is that going to hurt the TV networks at all?
Well, it's also how you define inducements, and the ALP national platform does not do that. No. If you listen to the gambling industry, and we heard them on Friday, some of them are promotions, so just offering bonuses and things, encouraging punters to continue to gamble is a promotion, not an inducement. So the definition is going to be quite important.
Mel, the question that I keep hearing people ask is why has the Prime Minister been so reluctant to go further on this issue? What is his thinking on this? Why has he been... they had to push so hard?
Look, there are a couple of factors here, some of them generous and perhaps less generous in the interpretation of it, but there is clearly concern about what implications there will be if you wind back arrangements that help fund both free-to-air broadcasters and our major sporting organisations. They are completely interlinked. It's not just advertising deals for the ads themselves. It's that the sporting organisations get a take from bets placed with those agencies. So they directly financially benefit from every bet placed. It's very interlinked. So the Prime Minister does have concerns about what the financial implications are for free-to-air broadcasters, which have an important role in our democracy, as well as sporting.
Yeah, sorry to jump in. Those networks, it is fair to point out, have been shedding journalist positions already this year. They're under pressure, and he's focused on that. The government's already making financial concessions in terms of the broadcast licence fees for free-to-air broadcasters as a concession of they are operating in a difficult environment, but it's important that they remain. I think there is also, when it comes to concerns, is that a lot of this it comes down to technical detail that is very hard to do. Things like, just change from an opt-out to an opt-in has a lot of technicality involved that we'll spare the details, but there are complications to it. But there are also less generous interpretations about the Prime Minister's reluctance to move too far, and that goes to the power and strength of the lobbying efforts of the gambling organisations and the sporting codes to work in their interests. And the media companies.
And the media companies in their interests ahead of the interests of people directly affected by gambling harm.
At the end of the day, is there also a view in the senior levels of the government that this is a second or third order issue for a lot of voters, not necessarily a top order vote changer?
Pollsters will tell you that it is, while it is a concern and voters will raise it as a concern, and in focus groups it's raised as a concern, and it overlaps with some other issues like concern for the impact of social media on children and concern, there's in Victoria in particular concern about the legacy of lockdowns for COVID parents about their kids. It is not a vote. It is not a vote swinger on its own. It's not something that will change people's vote like the economy and cost of living will. So in that sense, there's probably a view that while the Prime Minister needs to find some kind of a deal because his backbenchers really worried, upset about it in certain seats of it across the board, it is not the thing that is going to switch people's votes.
I mean, Sam, he wants to get a deal done. He wants to get it done
does.
this week.
But I think it's common sense that this is not the top order issue. This is a very important issue. It devastates lives. But the issue that most voters are focused on is cost of living, housing, the economy. This is an important social issue that needs to be addressed, but it's not the number one.
Well, time to talk to Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young. And first, here was the Prime Minister's final word on this issue as Parliament rose before the winter break.
This is good reform. This is a major step forward, and the Parliament should vote for it. If they don't, then you do have the option of the status quo. You do have that option. But what we will do is we have taken the strongest possible action that any government has taken in history.
Sarah Hanson-Young, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, and happy birthday.
Well, thank you very much. It now does look like the government is willing to give some ground on inducements and potentially the broadcast rules for gambling ads as well. Do you welcome this willingness to shift?
Well, everyone else can see that it needs to happen, David. I mean, I'm just watching that clip from the Prime Minister there. I mean, what was going on in the government that they didn't think that people would be extremely upset if the government putting on the table legislation that is so weak, that fails to protect families, that fails to protect young people from the predatory nature of gambling. And if the government's now willing to move on some things, well, good. But the devil's going to be in the detail. And what I say to the Prime Minister and to the government is put your cards on the table. Let's see how far you're prepared to go. Because previously, the government had committed to the Murphy report whole suite of recommendations that were designed to make it fairer on people and safer for people, not just continuing the status quo or letting the big corporations, the big gambling companies off the hook.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't think the government committed to implementing that Murphy report. That's been the problem all along.
It was a government-chaired committee.
Sure.
And for years, they've let it languish. It had unanimous support across the different sides of politics. This is because actually, and I think the government has really misread the room here, this is not an ideological issue, David. This is about people's lives. This is about the vulnerability of people who have gambling addiction, the destruction that it has for families, for young people, for small business. And that's who the Prime Minister should be listening to.
So where is this at now? Have you been talking to the Minister, Annika Wells? Have you been talking yet to the Prime Minister? What's going to happen in the next few days?
Yeah. Look, I have had some conversations with the Minister about this, and I was really clear that what is on the table is not enough. And we've seen, thank goodness, we saw the evidence come out of that Senate inquiry, because it has shifted the political discussion, and that's important. I'm speaking to people on the opposition side as well, who are rightfully angry that a government with 94 seats and the opportunity to get something done in the Senate, and the government sitting there squibbing it. I haven't spoken to the Prime Minister about this yet.
Do you expect you will?
Well, I hope so. But the government's they've got to put their cards on the table.
So just on that, you're saying the government's got to put its cards on the table. Does that mean you're not going to put forward your own amendments? You want them to put something on the table beyond the existing legislation?
Well, I've been really clear, and as have members of the community and the experts about this. Peter Murphy's report, which I read again yesterday, by the way, I mean, it's really clear. Partial bans do not work. In the absence of the government not tackling online advertising, where it's the most insidious because it's targeted, these companies, let's be clear, these big media companies and tech companies online, they have access to all of our data. They know who the weakest links are. They know who to target. They know who are vulnerable, and they go after you. So, unless there is real move online, this whole thing is set up to fail. We need proper bans on online advertising. You know, some people are suggesting an opt-in rather than an opt-out. Well, I want to hear what the government has to say about that.
Is that your position as well?
Well, I'm prepared to entertain that. Inducements, of course they should be gone.
Completely gone?
Oh, absolutely. The Murphy report was really clear about this.
And what is an inducement is often, you know, in the eye of the beholder.
I heard the gambling companies on last week, David tried to tell me they were generosities.
Yeah.
I mean, give me a friggin' break.
Okay, if you're paying a punter out, if their horse comes second rather than first, is that an inducement?
Look, I think they use every trick in the book to promote, and it's a real predatory nature. So whether it's special deals, whether it's extra credits, whether it's favours to events, whether it's
they
direct
all need to go?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Inducements need to be off the table. And of course we need a national regulator, because the biggest issue about all of this is the government's introduced this legislation. It's weak, it's got holes through it. I mean, you could run a truck through this. They've made it more complicated, and you know what happens when things are complicated? It's destined to fail.
At the end of the day,
there's no one, there's nobody that is going to be able to implement it. So they put in place some rules, as weak as they are, and there's no cop on the beat. I mean, it fails at every point.
Okay, well, if the bill is strengthened beyond what's already in the legislation, is that bottom line, is the status quo weaker than what the government is willing to do? Would you be prepared to vote against what they do if it's not everything you want? Make the perfect the enemy of good.
Well, look, I mean, the government said they weren't prepared to move at all, and now we hear they are. So, I mean, they're playing games here. And they put up a piece of legislation that their own members, their own backbenchers, know is not strong enough. So now they're saying, oh, well, we may be prepared to move. Well, let's see how far you're prepared to move. Are you prepared to stand up for the Australian people, for the most vulnerable, for the families who are being torn apart, or are you going to continue to play footsies with the gambling industry?
And Senator, are you prepared to vote for something that is an improvement on the status quo, even if it is not everything that you're talking about this morning?
Well, I can tell you what, I'm not prepared to vote for what's on the table at the moment. But, David, I've got a track record of being able to negotiate and get things done.
Well,
the Prime Minister knows that, the government knows that, the opposition knows that. And I've said to the government, if you are not prepared to do what's needed here, well, we'll take this out of your hands and we'll do it in the Senate ourselves, because the majority of senators know that what the government has put on the table is not good enough, including a bunch of their backbenchers.
On a couple of other fronts in your portfolio, the government's also trying to force tech giants to pay for Australian news on their platforms. It's now proposing they pay 2.5% levy on their digital ad revenue under the News Media Bargaining Code. Will you support Labor on this?
Look, we haven't seen the legislation yet. It hasn't been released. We only know the changes as per...
The principle, is that...
The principle, look, we know that big tech companies are taking the work of journalists and creators in Australia, having it on their platforms and making massive profit off it. That's not okay. Big tech has to be held to account here, and they have to pay for the content made by others, the work of others that they want to use.
And is a 2.5% levy on
well,
ad
I think there's
enough?
A question about whether the amount is enough to compensate Australian journalists and media outlets. So I really want to kick the tyres on this. I also think the bigger question in all of this is how do we ensure that AI is tackled too? Because we're talking about the social media companies taking content, but what about all the AI companies that are hoovering up journalists' work? In a time when mis and disinformation is rife, some politicians, are using that for their own political advantage. We actually need public interest journalism that is trusted, that is Australian, and that has an element of accountability. Well, and I say this to you, I can't imagine that Pauline Hanson and One Nation are going to want to allow this new funding model to go to the ABC. And I will fight tooth and nail to make sure our public broadcaster gets its fair share.
I wanted to ask you finally on artificial intelligence, the data centre debate. You've said you want a moratorium on new data centres until the requirements for these data centres to pay for and provide their own renewable energy and water are legislated. The government says it'll do that by early next year. If and when that's done, is that enough, or do you still have concerns about data centres beyond the impact on energy and water?
We need an ironclad guarantee of these things, right? It can't just be best endeavours.
But if it's put in law...
Well, and the devil will be in the detail on that. But the Australian community is already sceptical of what's going on here. And you can see this across the country. Communities are actually starting to rise up and say, actually, what do we get from this? What do we get out of hosting these big-scale, massive data centres when we're being told electricity prices might go up? They might be taking our drinking water. We don't know. We don't know what it means for actual jobs in the long run. In fact, we're hearing AI is going to impact people's
So
economy.
Are you suggesting some sort of additional tax on data centres?
AI and data centres are the new extractive industry, and we made this mistake already. We let the gas companies off the hook, and now hear them crying blue murder when you talk about taxing their gas exports. Let's not make the same mistake. So I want an ironclad guarantee for the Australian people. Their power bills won't go up, their water's going to be protected, their jobs are going to be protected, and that they get some type of community benefit. Because without those things, there is going to be no social licence. And it's evaporating very quickly. People are sus of these big tech bros, and they have every right to be.
Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, how has politics changed in the 25 years since this show began? First, let's return to our panel. Samantha Maiden from news.com.au, Karen Middleton from The Monthly, and the ABC's Melissa Clarke. So just to pick up on what we heard there from Sarah Hanson-Young on the gambling ads, Sam, obviously the Greens want Labor to go a whole lot further, but the Senator will sit down and talk with the Prime Minister if he's willing to do that. And we saw them strike that deal on the environment laws on that issue. So, I don't know, I still think the coalition's probably the preferred approach for Labor, but what do you think?
Well, I think that Sarah Hanson-Young was making it pretty clear there that she's prepared to talk to the government and she's prepared to do a deal, but I take your point.
Yeah.
The coalition is certainly in the box seat when it comes to this one. I mean, there will be talks all the way around with the Greens, with the crossbench. You know, the crossbench have already put forward some amendments on these issues, but the government has made it pretty clear that it is looking to work with the coalition, that Sarah Henderson, as their spokesperson, is in the box seat. She has been incredibly tight about what she is willing to move on and has indicated that it is those broadcast rules that she in particular is focused on. I think it's got a little messier when we've had the likes of Simon Kennedy on the backbench starting talking about a duty of care, but the government sees a way forward that has the least amount of change being with the coalition, and I think ultimately that's where the deal will
And Sarah Hanson-Young saying, oh, I can negotiate, I've negotiated before, suggests she knows that too.
Yeah. Well, let's turn now to the curious case of a minister, a migration crackdown and a press club postponement.
Tony Burke was meant to give a big speech about cutting migration this week, but he cancelled it.
How embarrassing.
Tony Burke wanted more power to decide who could come and stay.
Measures like capping backpackers, tightening family reunion rules and restricting rights for asylum seekers.
It's quite interesting now. They're picking up a lot of my policies.
So what is it that Tony Burke has planned? What is it that he has been rolled on presenting to Cabinet? What is it that the left of the Labor Party are going to demand in return?
Those socialist members of their Cabinet that are helping to destroy this country.
Immigration levels are down 45% on the peak.
He wants to look like he's cutting migration, but he's not. He's lying.
You also need to make sure that we're not pitting parts of our country against other people.
We need the jobs done, but Australians aren't there to do them.
We don't need any more Uber drivers, nail technicians, dog walkers. These people, gone.
All right, so lots of theories. Why was Tony Burke's press club address postponed? Who's got the answer? Sam?
Well, I think what happened was they had a meeting of ERC that was in the morning, right?
This is the Expenditure Review Committee.
Expenditure Review Committee. Yep. And so that is a very powerful subcommittee of Cabinet that a lot of the time, it's actually an interesting story of how Anthony Albanese works. They actually bleed out a lot, like the fights don't always happen in Cabinet. So they have this meeting of the ERC. The Prime Minister is away because he's on holidays. It's chaired by Richard Marles. You've got the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, in there, the Finance Minister, Katie Gallagher, Catherine King, I think Daniel Molino is in it. And basically they have this argument about what is going on. The meeting goes longer than it was expected. Cabinet is left cooling its heels. And essentially there is this pushback in that meeting about the size and scale of these changes, of whether more time is needed. Some people, perhaps mischievously, have even suggested there's a pushback from the people that don't want to see Tony Burke as the next cab off the rank for the leadership. And the decision is made to basically put this on a bit of a pause. Now, so that means
until the PM's back.
So by the time it gets to Cabinet, there's no fight in Cabinet. What's presented to Cabinet is there's all this agreement on the broad brushes of this. We need to work out some of the detail. The other important thing to say, it's not about cutting the headline rate of migration. The problem is that to get to the target of the forecast target, they need to make some more changes. But I think the real action, well,
that's interesting.
was in ERC.
And my understanding is that there was agreement on where they needed to get to in various categories, but the concern was about the pathway they chose to get to. I think it's one particular area, and I don't know what it was, and that there was there's been a suggestion there was some late information, or I don't know if it was legal advice or late information or something that into the mix of the conversation that raised questions about the preferred method of reaching that a goal, and that there was concern that if that wasn't settled, that Tony Burke couldn't then get up at the press club and say, we're aiming for X. The question then would come, well, how are you getting there? And if he couldn't answer that, then it would sort of get away from...
Better to postpone it. Look, I understand that it will still go ahead in the next couple of weeks. They're close to settling all of this.
Yeah.
But whatever you do in migration, Mel, is not easy. Otherwise, it would have been fixed by now. But to get that net overseas migration number down from around 300,000 down to the forecast this year is for 245, 225 next year. It's a big drop.
It's a big drop. And look, there's the specific details and then there's the big picture, right? So the details are where it's really difficult. You pull one thread and everything else moves. If you try and limit
how long...
if you try and limit how long backpackers stay, the regional communities are really frustrated. If you limit students and how long they can stay on, you're hurting a big export industry from us, likewise skilled workers. So that's why it's so hard to pull at these threads and why it takes so much careful detail. But I think we just pull out and look at the bigger picture here of what the government is trying to do. And it comes to this language of target and forecast. You know, net overseas migration is a product of our demand-driven migration system. It is a forecast, but it has become politically a target. And the government is getting hammered by the Coalition and One Nation for continually failing to meet
Are they
this
spooked by One Nation?
target. Well, now they have to try and meet it. This is a plan to try and meet the norm that has been forecast by the time we get to
There's all of that, but there's also how you message that, how you explain that, and the emphasis that you choose. And so, yes, Pauline Hanson has gone... She's got very absolute. You listen to her language, it's getting tougher and tougher. You know, she gave that interview this week saying, I don't care if business is worried about not having migrant workers. I don't care, too bad, you know. She's just getting harder and harder. And the government has to manage a constituency that partly wants migrants, values diversity. We saw the Prime Minister just back from leave give a speech last night, very heavy on the importance of multiculturalism and what diversity brings to the community. So he's got to juggle that while then sending out this harder message on immigration.
A couple of other things to mention though, like a lot of this issue is a hangover from the COVID period where they stopped migration and then Scott Morrison opened the floodgates. The Labor Party points out that they have already reduced migration by, I think, 45,000 or something. That's not nothing, right? I think the target of this legislation or these reforms is really about bridging visas because there are those two different ways of counting it, and the issue really is all the people that come in on visas and then change
or a backpacker
what they're doing.
Once that's done, they go into a bridging visa.
And the other emerging issue, I think, is we've already got one university, Sydney University, I think possibly Murdoch as well, that have more international students enrolled than domestic.
Right.
And I think that those sort of issues are going to start to get traction because, of course, we need international students, but when people look at the fact that one of Australia's most premier universities has more international students than domestic.
It's not going to sit comfortably. Look, just very quickly, I want to touch on the housing issue because, again, this week, more data showing the house price fall. Cotality have given us a bit more information in this breakdown because I found this fascinating. Where are prices falling in the lower range of the housing market? So these are homes under $700,000. Actually, prices are still going up. Only a little bit, they're still going up. The falls have been in the middle price range and the higher price range, as you can see there. And this is over the last 3 months, so not just over 1 month, but over 3 months. Tanya Plibersek said, never been a greater time to be a first home buyer. But when you look at that data, Mel, maybe there has been a better time. It's the lower end that's still going up.
It is still an incredibly hard market for first home buyers to go into, and the changes that the government has made has not turned that around in an immediate way, despite all of the headlines we see about property prices coming down. But there are a lot of other factors at play here. We also have a really unsettled property market where a lot of people are stepping back and just not making a decision yet. The government is hoping that there is enough time between now and the next federal election for things to wash through the system, hopefully interest rates not rise further yet, and by the time we have another year and a half, a lot more people know someone who's a first-home buyer.
Is it worried, the government?
I'm sure they'll be worried about the confidence in the economy. That's where it gets complicated. If it's starting to look like the economy is not going well, that has a psychological effect on consumers. You know, we hear the Reserve Bank governor talking about expectations on inflation and how they need to keep the expectations down too. So there's that problem that they need to manage. And, you know, to the point about first home buyers, the idea of these changes was to strip out investors. If that's happening, you're going to have the first home buyers left and they're going for the houses at the lower end of the market. So there's more of them gathered at that end. That is naturally going to mean that the slowdown is less there.
I just think there's a lot of deranged, unhinged and frankly malevolent commentary on this issue. I would listen to Cotality and the economics over politicians any day, and what they will tell you is the biggest impact on the housing market right now is interest rates. That is what is driving prices. Yes, absolutely, these changes are taking investors out. That's adding fuel to the fire. Now, there is a question there of, is this the right time to do it? Should you have just left interest rates to do their work? The government maintains is exactly the right time to do it, and they are absolutely banking on the idea that by the time we get to 2028, they will be able to point to the fact that they've actually done something to housing prices.
Great point to finish on. Sam, Mel, we're going to say goodbye to you. Thank you both very much for joining us this morning. Karen, you're going to stick around as we bring back some familiar faces to mark 25 years of Insiders.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Insiders. Welcome to Insiders, an audacious and unprecedented act of terror. 17 days into the Gulf War, the Battle of Baghdad has begun. The news overnight of a series of bomb blasts in Bali. Asylum seekers has always been a damned if you do, damned if you don't issue. Well, Australia has had just 2 elections in the last 8 years, but in that time we've now had 5 Prime Ministers. Paul Kelly, political commentator for The Australian.
It's very much a tribute to Howard. I mean, he did this himself. We don't know who the real Mark Latham is. This is a calculated strike by the Prime Minister against Peter Costello to teach him a lesson. A special week for Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard. It's not easy for parties to change leaders.
That panel, Gerard Henderson, Catherine Murphy and Dennis Atkin, Laura Tingle, Andrew Probyn and Chris Ullman, Lenore Taylor, Mark Kinney and Phil Curry, Nikki Sava, Malcolm Farr and welcome, Mark Riley. What would you like to talk about? Have there been genuine asylum seekers?
This is not an easy decision.
That is completely fanciful.
The issue was not resolved by emoting on television. It makes it more difficult for the government.
I am very angry about this.
I think this government can resolve it.
Utter bullshit.
The higher the level of rhetoric, the less likely there will be a decision.
Bullshit.
Why are they asking us not to panic?
Didn't you see the later edition of this? The Peter Costello edition was panic.
What I want to know from you, Andrew, is why is that relevant?
Am I able to answer, or don't you want to know?
Well, who could stop you? Go on.
Oh, you've tried.
And it's time we talked about Matt Price. He was a fabulous panellist and journalist, but an even better mate.
Sometimes in the business of journalism and in politics and just in life, we can lose touch with the human dimension, and Matt strove very hard not to do that. I think journalism will miss him, and we miss him terribly.
I'm joined now by the Prime Minister. Good morning, Prime Minister.
Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, Barry. Thanks for having me on the program.
G'day, Barry.
Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, Barry. Great to be here.
Thanks, Barry.
There's 2 ways this interview can go. You can act like a jilted lover and we can do that for several minutes, or you can ask me whatever political questions you've got and
All
I'll
right,
answer them.
let's get started.
Well, you go on. Sorry,
Well,
I'm talking too much.
you're-
I always do. Seriously, you've lost the plot there, with all due respect.
I mean, fair crack of the whip.
Tell us a bit about yourself. Where are you from? What's your background?
I'm a small-town country accountant.
And are you a loyal party man? Are you going to do as you're told when you get to the Senate?
I'm a loyal party man for the Queensland Nationals.
I'm David Speers. Great to be here. Welcome to Insiders. Welcome to Insiders.
Let's bring the panel back in. Laura Tingle, Paul Sakal and Sam Maiden.
Patricia Karvelis, John Keogh and John Paul Janke, Jacob Griever, Claire Armstrong and Waleed Ali. Raf keeping a good social distance over there, and an even greater social distance to Nikki and Catherine. Scott Morrison, welcome to the program. Peter Dutton, welcome to the program. Anthony Albanese to become Australia's 31st Prime Minister, and independents march into Parliament. Prime Minister, thanks for joining us here at Garma.
Good to be on the program and great to be here at Garma.
We're looking at about a 60-40 result in No's favour.
That's a bit different to saying there are no good Muslims, to be clear.
No, I think we're on a unity ticket there.
I don't think we are.
ever make a slip, but you made one there, but thank you.
No, okay. Well, let me ask you one more time, because I don't think you answered it, Barnaby Joyce. We'll leave you with that. We'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching.
Makes you feel better because you've emoted.
You're making us all feel very excited about being here.
Well, I am thrilled to say we are now joined by the one and only Barrie Cassidy, the man who founded this show, came up with the whole idea and hosted it for 18 years, so it's great to have you back. Karen Middleton was one of the original panellists. Still here, thankfully for us.
Well, thank you.
It's great to have you here. And Paul Kelly, editor-at-large at the Australian newspaper, and you were a fixture the start of every show for, what was it, 9 years?
For 9 years,
9
Barry.
years.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. That's Barry over there. And Barry sitting over there is a little unusual because you'd be more comfortable, I'm sure, on this side. Look, Barrie, just remind us, how did this show come about?
Yeah, 2001, Max Utrich had just become news director. He was based in London. I was in Brussels. He phoned me up and said, you've been banging on about this Sunday morning political program idea, so maybe now's your chance. It just happened that a couple of characters were passing through Brussels, staying with us at the time, Mike Bowers and Gavin Morris. And so we went to a pub to workshop the whole idea.
As you do.
And the structure is pretty much as we devised it at the time. We've obviously tweaked it over the years. But the bar was called Morse a Beat, which in English is sudden death. And as Bowers observed on Facebook just the other day, he said insiders avoided sudden death for 25 years.
Yeah,
so well done to everybody involved.
No, and here we are. Look, Karen, as I say, you've been part of this for that full 25 years. Yeah, what do you recall from those early days?
Oh, look, I mean, I think the point Barrie makes about the format is key, because what hasn't changed really is the general idea of what the show is. And I think what's worked is this idea of structure and spontaneity. So we would get, from Barrie and from you, a sort of list of topics and pose some general questions to the panellists, but not telling us what to say and not scripting it. So we would all think about the same thing. We'd read clippings. We'd, have a kind of similar baseline, but we wouldn't have the conversations till we got onto the set, and that brought the spontaneity and just tweaking that show over the years. So, early on we didn't really know what it was going to be, but it's managed to maintain that continuity but freshen itself up, and I think that's been key to it.
Paul, that very first show, it's important when the show started back then 25 years ago, and the Prime Minister, John Howard, at the time was the first to appear on it after a pretty important political moment.
Look, it was a terrific first show, and Barrie's interview with John Howard appears in Howard's memoirs. And the reason it does is because in the early part of 2001, Labor was shaping to win the election. Kim Beazley was convinced he was going to be the Prime Minister. There'd been a quarter of negative growth. There was a fear of recession. Petrol prices were high. Labor had a massive lead in the public opinion polls. The day before the program, there was the Aston by-election, and that showed that the Liberals held the seat. And when Barrie interviewed John Howard, the message from Howard was, the Liberal Party's back in the game. The Howard government is on the way back. That was his message, and eventually it proved to be correct. And subsequently, of course, we had 9/11 and the Tampa. But Howard, historically, was always able to go back to point to the Aston by-election and make the very contentious claim that he would have been re-elected for a third term anyway, regardless of Tampa and 9/11.
It's fascinating. I don't want to just talk about the program, but what's happened over the last 25 years, Barrie? What have been the big changes in politics, the defining trends, do you think, in that period?
Well, go back to the year it started, 2001. The election in 2001, later that year, just over 80% of the electorate cast their primary votes to one of the major parties. All of the seats were shared by the two major parties, apart from three independents, one of them being Bob Katter, who was the one constant throughout this period and is still there. So now, when you look at the opinion polls, it's 50%, just over 50%. So you've had that degrading of the support for the major parties, 80% to 50% in the life of insiders.
Yeah.
And that's quite extraordinary. It happened kind of like bankruptcy, like slowly and then all at once. And the all at once period was pretty much just in the lead up to the last election. The coalition, what was in front, was expected to win and then didn't. And not only did they not win, they recorded their worst result in history.
Yeah.
And so something happened through that period to really accelerate the trend. And then, of course, One Nation stepped in, because I think that was the point where Liberal Party supporters thought, we're giving up on them. They want to get rid of Labor governments, and they thought this is no longer the vehicle. One Nation was on the rise, and they jumped on board to the point where One Nation is now in the mid-20s.
And there's a lot linked to and responsible for that decline in the major party vote, Paul, over that period, whether it's the fracturing of the electorate, the decline in trust in politics and institutions. I mean, what do you see as the the most defining trends over that period?
Well, I think politics has been transformed over the course of the last 25 years, David. And the reason for this essentially is technology and culture. Technology and culture have driven a wedge right through our society and right throughout our politics. And so essentially politics is now conducted in real time, courtesy of social media, the internet, with AI coming. So you've got a collapse of trust, you've got politicians under more pressure, you've got a more fractured society, you've got a lot of divisions, and so you've got not just a decline in support for the major parties, you've got a crisis of the system. More and more people are sceptical of the value of the political system, and we've got this incredible tension between politics, which is all-consuming on the one hand. I mean, the public is hooked into politics, even though it doesn't like a lot of politics, but we've got governments are underperforming. Governments are not doing the job they ought to do. We are seeing a decline in the economic and social indicators. So you've got this incredible tension between the politics on the one hand and government on the other. Government is not performing.
Well, you mentioned social media as part of that. It's such an enormous change over this 25 years, the rise of social media. And let's just say it hasn't all necessarily elevated our democracy.
Dirty, dirty, dirty George. Done deals, done dirty.
Mannequins and we breaking the moves, breaking out and we breaking the codes, similar to the Jack who stole.
We've got a plan to get Australia back on the front foot.
Hi, can you believe it is July?
I need help to name my 2 working dogs on my desk. Drop us a follow and drop us a comment.
Karen, I'm not sure what they're thinking, but look, is this the big change here, the way politicians communicate with the electorate?
Yeah, and it does come back to technology, as Paul said. I mean, gone are the days of the old-fashioned, make a hard decision, go out and sell it, argue the case, persuade people. I think politicians have seen technology as a tool to take shortcuts, to be able to, slice the electorate up into demographics and target their messaging at different people. And then the algorithms have constantly raising people's expectations. So now that you've got to be entertaining,
you've got to be a performer,
exciting, and so then all of a sudden the substance is kind of hollowed out, and it's all about the frippery.
It's not all bad though. I mean, social media has democratised in a lot of ways.
Absolutely,
politics.
But I think it is also people are sick of the politicians. They've lost trust with the electorate because of this. So in some ways they've sort of tried to more specifically target people, and people have been turned off. And now it's the fragmentation has gone not only in the vehicle that they're using on social media, but in terms of independence, and people are suddenly going, well, actually, I don't need to vote for you anymore. The old rules don't apply. I can vote for this person.
I'll tell you one of the
instead.
other fascinating things with social media: embarrassing moments can live in perpetuity, right? They're there forever. They live online. They have a life of their own. They can often define a politician for better or worse as well, which brings us to, we saw Matt Price there earlier, and one of the things, Barry, you did was introduce the Matt Price moment at the end of each year to really celebrate the funny moments, the moments that Matt would have absolutely loved. We've had you pick the best 3 over the last 25 years, and I think this might be one of them. It's 2022 election campaign in northern Tasmania. Scott Morrison probably thought it was a good idea at the time, a bit of a kick of soccer with the kids. But the crash tackle there just became such a defining moment. The bulldozer
enthusiasm got the better of him.
Anyway, the prime ministers that we've seen over the last 25 years, how do they compare? Is anyone willing to say, which ones really stand out, from John Howard to Anthony Albanese? And I guess in some ways they bookend. They do have some similarities, those two. I
would put it rather in terms of eras. So when Insider started, we picked up the tail end of the more organised certain period of politics.
Howard and Beazley and...
Yeah, well, it really started after Whitlam. Don't forget, Fraser had 7 years. Yeah. So that was a 35-year period of long governments, prime ministers who were around for a substantial time. And so Insiders picked up 7 years of that. And then the next 15 years was a chaotic period when governments were not sustainable, they didn't last very long, and both major parties actually cut down a prime minister while they were in office. So they were the 2 eras. Of course, the interesting
thing now is, are we in a third era now? As Albanese started a third era, he's had 4 years, and chances are he'll go on beyond this. And I think it'll be a third era, but like the first, but different because of what's going on the right of politics, where the right parties are cannibalising one another. And while that's going on, you can't really line it up with that first era. It'll be a different era altogether.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, you've written perhaps more than anyone and studied more than anyone these prime ministers over that period. I mean, is there something to what Barry's saying there about the churn that we've gone through? Perhaps now we're coming out into something more stable?
I think that's right. I mean, the program started with John Howard as Prime Minister. So we had the stability of Howard, and then we've now finished up with the stability of Anthony Albanese. But in between, we had 15 years of insiders where we had 7 changes of Prime Minister. So we had enormous instability at the top. Well, it was fantastic for us, of course, and there are so many great stories. But of course, we had the instability of the Rudd-Gillard government. Then we had the instability of the Abbott-Turnbull-Morrison period. And essentially what you had during this period was, when Prime Ministers don't have enough time to govern, you can't get effective governance. And that's what happened. So it was a period of great turbulence, fantastic opportunities for the media, of course, and we thrived, the program thrived. But of course, we're now back with stability under Albanese, and his authority over the Labor Party is much greater than many people appreciate.
Well, we were just talking about the migration issues earlier.
Yeah.
And they need him back in the room to settle it.
But I think, you know, it was incredibly fortuitous, the timing of the program, because 2001 was a year that was a cleaving of global politics. What happened in that second half of the year with the September 11 attacks, and people were shocked, and things we never thought were possible became possible, and people were saying, what does all this mean? And so the program was an opportunity every week to try and make sense of the domestic events in a global context, to be the sort of, well, what does this mean? And not saying we got it right, of course we didn't, but we talked about it and gave people a conversation starter, and I think the timing was amazing for that.
I'll tell you something else that's changed a lot in that era from 2001 to now. When we look at the politicians themselves, here's a bit of a visual demonstration, how it started and how it's going. This is the Howard cabinet back in 2001. So a lot of dark suits there, you might notice. And then fast forward to today and, well, a lot more colour, Karen, a lot more women in politics, a lot more women in Parliament. It's been a great asset and strength for Labor. Liberals still struggling with how to get more women in, though.
Yeah, they are. They've had periods where they've done well, but they've been allergic to the idea of quotas and nudging people along, because they always argue it's about merit. And I think it was Amanda Vanstone who said we'd be successful on merit if there were as many terrible and stupid women in Parliament as there were terrible and stupid men, or words to that effect. You know, she was basically saying it's actually not merit, it's other things. It's merit sometimes, but it's also other advantages, and you needed to write that. Labor Party made a hard decision on that decades ago now, and I think this is the result.
This is just one of the struggles the Liberals have got, Barry. What's going on the Conservative side?
They've given themselves enough time to test the strategy sans quotas, right? They've given enough time to show it doesn't work. At what point are they going to accept that and get on with it?
Yeah, but their problems go beyond just that, don't they? When you look at how the Conservative side of politics looks today compared to 25 years ago, where are they going wrong?
Well, the really tough part for them, and Paul and I were talking about this before, is that the way that it is, they don't look like picking up many seats in the next election. So how do they refresh? And if they don't refresh, how do they get back into the game? It's just that vicious circle. It's going to be tough for them. It's going to be tough for them for the years ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned one politician who probably hasn't changed at all through these 25 years, and that's Bob Katter. He's another one of your top 3 moments of the last 25 years.
You know, people are entitled to their sexual proclivities. You know, I mean, let there be 1,000 blossoms bloom, as far as I'm concerned. You know, but I ain't spending any time on it, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person is torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
No one can pivot like Bob Katter.
That was a change of gear that you'll never see again. It was amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was.
Look, I want to look at how Australia has changed as well over these 25 years. And as I say, Paul, you've written a lot about this, but as a country and as an electorate, Are we more polarised, more fractured? Are we angrier even than we were back then? How have we changed?
I think we've changed a lot, David. And I think we're a much more fractured and divided country. We no longer agree on a lot of shared values. I think the great paradox is we're both more progressive on the one hand and more conservative on the other hand.
How do you mean?
Well, I think there's a stronger sense of commitment to the centre-left in terms of progressive policies. Yet you can also see that there's a strong conservative movement and there's a revival in conservative ideology. Now, the interesting thing about these tensions, of course, is it's done great damage to the coalition because the coalition is divided about the nature of conservatism. But what this really means is we're a more polarised society. The centre is weaker and the extremes of both the left and the right are stronger. What this means, I think, overall is that government is more difficult. It's more difficult for government to identify and push through a national interest policy because it's much more difficult to get a consensus given the extent of polarisation.
Is that right, that the centre is gradually getting weaker?
Yes, I think so. And back to the technology idea, you know, the great advantage might have been to be able to target messaging. The great disadvantage is we don't have the same shared experience anymore. Everyone's feed is different on social media because the algorithms target to individuals. So governments can't, you know, message to the nation. Prime Ministers can't message to the nation the way they used to, and that makes it much harder.
Does it make governing harder?
It does, obviously it does, but we're talking here about the outrage industry, right, that's represented, and that's become so radicalised to the left and the right, hard left, hard right, and we shouldn't fall into the trap, and politicians certainly should not fall into the trap of thinking that that's typical of the way Australia is. It's not like that at all. We have shifted, Paul is right, we have shifted, but not to the extent that social media would make you believe. And we can't fall into the trap of thinking that is the case. And I do think there's a healthy centre-left in the country, and I still think there's a centre, but you wouldn't know it sometimes looking.
There have been many moments, but a couple in particular I just want to touch on over the course of this period that go to who we are as a country. One, I think, was the yes vote on same-sex marriage in 2017, and that was an overwhelming yes vote, and certainly the progressive side of politics celebrated that. We saw those images in the parliament as well of the celebrations around that yes vote, certainly on the Labor side in particular. But then in 2023, we had an overwhelming no vote on the issue of the Indigenous voice when that was put to a referendum, and that was, of course, a cause for great celebration on the Conservative side. Paul, when you look back at these sort of big moments of national votes on issues, what does that tell us?
I think they are really defining moments, David, and I think they reveal a lot about Australian democracy and about the Australian character. I mean, the same-sex marriage reform was an epic event, and it was fascinating to see the way public opinion changed and changed so quickly, and that caught out the Conservative movement.
Big time.
But then if we go to the voice, Anthony Albanese promoted the voice. There was a great sense of confidence about this change when he first started the campaign, but it was a flawed concept, and at the end of the day, the Conservatives, if you like, won that particular issue. So essentially what you're seeing is you're seeing different outcomes, one a victory for progressives, another one victory for Conservatives over quite a relatively short period of years, which indicates, I think, the capacity of the Australian people to step back and then make a judgment. And often they'll make different judgments, but that is a function of the strength of our democracy.
I think the common thing between those two votes, remember though, is that the people who were being voted on, whose lives were most directly being commented on by the rest of the country, found both processes incredibly traumatic, and I think there were legacies to both of those, albeit the result being different, and that's something to bear in mind as well with that experience.
See a retreat from referenda for quite a while for that reason and others. If we look at these trends, where are we heading? What's in store for Australia? Barrie, if that major party vote, coming back to the first point you made, we've seen it drop off. Is that going to continue? Do we end up with more European-style minority government in Australia in perpetuity? Where are we headed?
Yeah, I think the trend that's been there for a while now about the shift to the right is starting to wane a bit. We saw an election of a candidate in the United States in Michigan just recently that shows that maybe the United States too is starting to turn back from that. But the mystery for Australia in politics is what will happen with the right once the worst of this is over, and will at some point Labor be inflicted by the same virus? And if it was to impact on Labor, for whatever reason, the Greens so far are not providing an alternative to disgruntled Labor Party voters. Maybe an amalgamation of not David Pocock himself, but the kind of principles that he represents combined with some of the values of the Teals. If a party structure based around that kind of thinking was to emerge, then Labor might have a few problems with its own base.
Yeah, what do you think, Karen? I mean, we are seeing potentially the seeds of that, because a couple of those Teals, Allegra Spender, Zali Steggall, have started up a party, but there hasn't been a rush of, a clamour to jump on board from some of the others.
And you get the feeling that the momentum for that was more around the way that donation laws are changing, and that seems to be, in proximity to that seems to have been part of the equation there. I do think Labor, is realising that it is also losing support to One Nation. If you look in the western suburb of Sydney, One Nation's particularly targeting those kinds of areas. I think there's crossover with some of the old traditional vote. Howard used to call them his battlers, because he swept that vote away. Now some of that vote is going to One Nation as well. So I think there's a lot of thinking for right across politics in the old parties, as I think the Greens like to call them, the old parties, that how to manage this peeling off, and how much of that vote has peeled and gone, and how much of it can be brought back, and what is it going to take? I mean, it's a really wickedly complicated situation now.
Paul, where do you think we're headed?
Well, look, I think the Labor vote is under pressure, but my judgment would be the Labor ascendancy is still likely to be pretty strong under Albanese through the preference system. I mean, the preference system is the absolute key, and that's why Labor is so successful these days. If we look at the coalition is in terrible strife given the rise of Hanson. So I think there'll be turbulence on the coalition side of politics for a long period of time. That will certainly help Labor. But my main concern is the quality of economic and social policy. I think that we are in a sense of decline here. I think governments increasingly can't deliver the sort of national interest progress in economic and social policy that the country needs. This is why the public is impatient, it's irritated, it's unhappy, it's restless. It wants to experiment by looking to other parties. So I think this is a very dangerous trend, and what the country needs is it needs some sort of circuit breaker so we get back to much better quality national policy in terms of economic and social outcomes.
All right, well, Paul Kelly, Karen Middleton, Barrie Cassidy. We'll be back very shortly with some final thoughts and observations. Time now for Mike Bowers, the one and only, and a very special look back at Talking Pictures.
I'm Mike Bowers. I'm talking pictures this morning with Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Julie Bishop, the Leader of the House of Representatives, Tony Abbott, the Deputy Leader of the Greens, Adam Bandt. Now, listen, your bag, right? Tony Windsor, when I did him, he said that all you had in there was toilet paper. Can we have a look in your bag?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
These are our notebooks.
Yeah.
And
there's some sun cream in there.
No, definitely no toilet.
No toilet paper, Tony.
Mind you, there are some government reports here that could possibly be used.
43rd Parliament opened with a lot of fanfare that there was going to be a new paradigm. Do you remember that? And it sort of started with a group hug. Are we doing the group hug? Group hug.
That's taking things a little too far, I reckon.
You very famously, I think, sent Kevin Rudd to the naughty corner.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Were you sent to the naughty corner as a child?
No, in fact, this just occurred to me during the question time, as he was sitting there looking plaintively at me with his funny little haircut over the top of his glasses, and I said, "You're a naughty boy." And I sent him to the naughty corner.
Was it a relief for you when the Prime Ministership ended? Did you have a sense, I can get back to my life now?
No, not really, but it was very nice getting back to the country, and I knew how to dial the telephone and drive the car, and Malcolm hadn't done that for some years. You had to relearn all that.
Well, a lot of the cartoonists will latch onto something like the boxing and they just don't let it go.
The boxing and the cauliflower ears. You know, I could have my ears surgically removed and then they'd say, oh, just like Chopper, I suppose.
Our Prime Minister is into the selfie. Are you onto this yet? Oh, there we go.
There is a great similarity in our complexions.
There is a similarity between us, isn't there?
Yeah, there is no question. I don't know who.
I saw a photo.
If there was a pinkometer, I think it would be going zoink.
It's been 26 years since I passed through Brussels and spoke to then European correspondent for the ABC, Barrie Cassidy. He had an idea for a new political program to be aired on Sunday morning. Tempting fate for a new program, we drank at some of the many bars that Brussels is famous for. The secret to the longevity is really not a secret. It's the incredible quality of the cartooning and political photography that has appeared on the program over this period. It makes it fresh and new every week. We've lost a number of cartoonists over the years: John Kudelka, Bruce Petty, Bill Leake and Ron Tanberg. A little hat tip to their contribution. Also, political photographer Ray Strange. Because I don't get to do this very often, it's usually the guest. It's my turn. Back to you, Spearsy.
Thank you, Mike. I thought he was going to do it back to you, Barry, there for a minute. But look, thank you to Mike and to all those who contributed to Talking Pictures over those 25 years. It is such an important part of this show. We've got a cake, so we're going to, which we're going to dive into soon enough. But before we get to that, I don't want to go through a whole list of thank yous, but a big thank you to our audience. We have a wonderful, dedicated, loyal audience who are passionate about their politics. So thank you for joining us each Sunday morning. We really do appreciate it. Paul, I just want to mention your contribution to, not just on this show over many years, but your contribution to all of us better understanding Australian politics through your amazing books, the latest of which, The Twilight of Exceptionalism. We did a podcast on it just a week or so ago. I just need to ask you, what is it about Australian politics that's kept you so fascinated for so long?
Well, David, to be a senior political journalist is a fantastic privilege. The access you have to the prime ministers, to the people who are running the country is special, it's unique. I've always felt a sense of responsibility. You've got to make the most of the access and the privilege that you enjoy. And so essentially what I've tried to do is I write my journalism, which, if you like, is the first cut, the daily cut on history. Then I want to go back and write a book, which is the second cut on history, and think, what did I get right, what did I get wrong, and where is the country going?
Well, thank you for doing it. Karen, just take us back to those very early days with some final thoughts from you.
Yeah, well, Barry mentioned having the idea, and then when he was ready to get a panel together, he took 5 or 6 of us, I think, out to lunch here in Canberra and said, here's my pitch. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, you know, and you do a lot of layers of thinking about this. What is this going to mean for me? What is this going to mean for politics? What is this going to mean, you know, where is this show going? You could never know that it was going to still be here in 25 years. But I do remember thinking, oh, big risk, I could really stuff it up, or it could be amazing. And I just felt that it was so different that it could really be valuable in politics, and I'm really proud and privileged to still be here.
No, we're so grateful that you are and all of your contributions. Barry, much I could ask you at this final point, but I thought perhaps if you're willing to offer any advice to politicians today, you know, the strengths and weaknesses, when you look at them, what's your advice to them?
Advice to politicians, they'll love this. Look, it really is respect yourself. Respect yourself more. Like, you are the people that have the contract with the community, and so it's your judgment, your individual values that you should bring to the show, and not those of the apparatchiks and the lobby groups. There was a time, you know, in Australian politics where press secretaries in the Prime Minister's office could tell senior ministers what to do. You know, that was humiliating for them, and that's part of the reason, I think, why there's been this, quite apart from the social media and the rest of it, is the lack of support for the major parties, is that it just appeared to the public they were representing the interests of the parties and not the interests of the country. And so to that extent, I think, you know, not unity for unity's sake, a bit of division occasionally is not a bad thing either.
No, I like that a lot. Barry, big thanks to you, not just for founding the show, for all that you did for so many years hosting it. It's wonderful that it's here now, 25 years, long may it prosper. It's a privilege to be a part of it. So thanks for coming back, spending this morning with us, and to all of you as well. Finally, the all-time classic Matt Price moment chosen by Barry. Ladies and gentlemen, we leave you with The Fixer. Thanks for watching.
You made it very clear yesterday.
I've dealt with it.
That you had to get the reform bill through, otherwise the 1,700 positions would go.
I'm a fixer.
How did you fix it?
I fixed it by funding it in another way, which you'll find out in the budget.
Why can't you tell us?
I wanted to be a surprise for you.
All right. But were you wrong?
You're making us all feel very excited about being here.